Welcome to another episode of Artist Spotlight, the podcast. As usual, I'm your host, Mitch Stringer. And again, we are here through our relationship with the Maryland Photography Alliance, where you can check out everything they have going on at mdphotoalliance.org. They've got great contests, they've got photo walks, and so many camera clubs are aligned with them to bring you updated information and just a really good place to bookmark and come back to learn more about photography and just get more and more involved in the community that we all appreciate. Well, this episode, I'm joined by a longtime friend of mine. It's amazing that as long as we've known each other, we have not aged a bit. It's remarkable. Patrick, much less so than I in terms of the aging, but I want to welcome Patrick Smith to the podcast.
Hey, Mitch, thanks for having me. And I have aged. If you can see, if you're watching, I have lots of grays. And I promise you, I did not have those grays when we first met many, many, many years ago.
So we met a lot of years ago, and you were in college at the time, and you were very involved in photography then. So, maybe a good place to start is the start. How is it that you first, kind of got interested in photography and picked up a camera with at least a sense of what you wanted to do with it?
Yeah, so kind of I'll work backwards a little bit. I'm a staff, well, I say staff, I'm a chief photographer at Getty Images. And if you would have asked me before we even met that I would be here today, I would have said no. I would have had no idea what I wanted to do. And the story I always give is that I'm the last of four boys. I grew up in Harford County, Maryland, and my dad was my coach my entire life. So I was bred from competition. If I was running up down the stairs against my brothers, I wanted to win. If I was playing soccer in the backyard, I wanted to win. If I was playing my own recreational club sports growing up, I wanted to outdo my brothers. So kind of my entire life was bred off of wanting to win and hating to lose. But getting into photography didn't come until later in life. Obviously, playing sports my whole life from probably the age of 5 until I was a freshman in college, where I was like, you know what? I don't want to play sports anymore. I picked up a camera just as a random thought of, hey, what else can I do with my life? What can I do? What kind of brings me instant gratification? And that actually didn't start with photography itself. It started with videography. And I was shooting video of street racing, which is like the Fast and Furious. And I got really into that. And I was editing clips and doing some stuff with friends and traveling all over the East Coast, kind of just trying to find this scene. And I realized this is difficult. Video is hard, and video is a long time to edit. And that's when I really got into photography. And I was like, you know what? I love sports. I love competition. And I bought my first digital camera. And that's where it all began.
So I got started off in photography back in the day when photography meant making pictures and dropping the film off at and this was not even 1 hour photo. This was
Yeah.
drop it off, and about 6 to 7 days later, you go to the camera shop and you pick it up. So for you, did you get in on this at the tail end of film, or at least during film, or more so digital?
Well, I do remember my parents going to like the 1 hour photo places. I vividly remember I could take you. I live in Forest Hill, Maryland. It's right near Bel Air. And I can take you to a spot. I think it's like a nail salon now that I remember my mom going in and I could smell the chemicals. And I remember just seeing all the pictures. I remember being a kid doing that. But I was certainly on the tail end of that. My career started with straight digital. I think I bought a Nikon D70 or D70S from probably Service Photo, and that was my first ever camera that I ever had owned. I did take one film course at Essex Community College. Um, I would love to look up my professor and maybe reconnect as I say that out loud, because it was like the classic. I was shooting graveyards and bridges and long exposures of highways and stuff like that. But that was really the only extent I had of learning photography and the basic fundamentals with film. But everything else was straight digital, and that was probably in, man, I'm trying to get dates in my head. Probably in the early 2000s, 2002, 2003 is when I kind of really started getting into this, and it was all digital by then.
See, I remember, geez, I mean, I was a kid and I forget the way it came about, but New York City used to have even more camera stores than they do now. They had like, it was like 53rd Street Photo or something like that, and Beach Photo. They had a whole bunch of them. So I remember getting a Nikon film camera that came with the Nifty 50, and that's all I knew. And as a kid, I didn't even understand that there were lenses other than the one that came with that, now I know to be a kit kind of camera. So when you kind of transitioned from video, or maybe it was during that, what kind of lens or lenses were you using? Or did you just use what came with the camera and that was kind of it?
Yeah, certainly was that kit lens. I actually recently went and bought a Nikon D70 so I could have like my first camera because I don't own that first camera. And it's in a Pelican case in my basement. I never use it, but just like I just wanted it one day to like show my kids when they're like 30 years old, like this is what I started with, and just kind of
Right.
see what they might have. But it was definitely a kit lens, probably like an 18 to 70. And I remember shooting sports with that because that's all I had. Like I was shooting baseball and college lacrosse at Essex Community College with that. I probably eventually graduated to some kind of 70 to 300, 5.6 or some kind
Mm-hmm.
of cheap 70, 200 type deal. And it wasn't until I got to Towson University where I remember I saved enough money to get a 300 2.8. And man, like I was stoked. Like I was so poor, but I bought it brand new and I use that thing all the time. And I remember it just basically changing my life of like, wow, I've made it. I have a 300 2.8. Like I can shoot things in a gym and I can shoot with a shallow depth of field. And it was just a great feeling compared to those kit lenses that you start with.
Yeah, I remember, back in the day going to the old Memorial Stadium to the Oriole games. And this is a brand that will date me, but I bought a pre owned Vivitar lens, and it was a 70 or 75 to 300. And it kind of, this almost sounds like I'm overstating it, but as a kid I wasn't. This kind of transported me from being in the stands to on the field, because at 300 now I can photograph the players on the field and not just the guys who were signing autographs on the warning track. So you kind of hit on where I was going to go, which is how eye-opening was that to go from these shorter focal lengths to now you're at not only 300, but you're at 2.8, so you can shoot in lower light and capture images and freeze action. What kind of like eye-opening moment was that for you?
It's kind of ironic you say that because I always joke that when I didn't know what I was doing, I was a better photographer. And I think that was kind of my early career. I didn't know any better. I didn't know a 24 to 70 from a 7200 to a 300. Like, this is what I had and this is what I used, right? It's no
Yeah.
different than someone getting an iPhone today and then, like, this is all I have, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I can make nice pictures with it. And they might have to zoom with their feet instead of zooming with a lens, right? And they don't really understand that concept, but I think that's really what I was in when I was super young. That I had no difference. I had no idea. I do remember that 300 though. It was like buying a Ferrari. You know what I mean? It was like something that I always wanted, and when I got it, you're right. Like I felt more confident. I could puff my chest out a little bit because maybe I felt like I could get closer. Maybe I just had this crazy, just like I said, confidence that I never had before as a young student photographer. It didn't make my pictures any better. I was still really struggling and trying to find myself. But it did something internally, which I think comes with a lot with photography in itself. It's less about the gear to me, especially now when I speak to students, it has less to do with that. But sometimes it's just that little nudge you need to kind of push you to the next dimension of your photography.
What I think, as I reflect on it, what I think it did for me is, when you're photographing almost anything, but I'll use people in this example. If you're photographing people, whether it's street photography or it's, your kids or it's sports or whatever, when you're photographing them with a long lens and you typically have their whole body in the frame and they're doing whatever it is that they're doing there, when you have a longer lens, you can photograph their face, their expressions, the portraits. So even though that athlete, that child, whoever it is, They're doing whatever they're doing. They're sitting on a bench. When you have a longer focal length, now you're not looking at them. You're sort of almost interpreting them because the facial expressions now are so much more apparent than they are when it's a full body shot. And you know this with all the work that you do. A lot of times, if you're shooting track and field and that athlete is doing the hurdles, you get a great shot of them hurdling. But it's after the race when they finish somewhere other than they were hoping to. And you see that expression on their face. When you're capturing that, you don't need a full body picture to capture that. Maybe it's chest up or waist up or even closer. So for me, I think that long glass can really capture the facial emotions.
Absolutely, you're right. And I think that's why I love sports because it's a human connection. It's exactly what you're talking about. It's body language, right? It's eyes. I remember very early in my career, it's all about two players and a ball. Like it was always like this like very formulaic thing, but it was always more than that. It was exactly what you just said. It's their eyes. Their eyes tell the story. A photographer that works for us, Bruce Bennett, always talks about the eyes, right? Talks about how the eyes tell the story, right? And they're looking down or looking up, right? Are they wide open, right? They can tell so much and doesn't just have to be sports. But yeah, I think sports photography is it's always about a human connection. And it's never been like, oh, win or lose. It's the human connection that everybody can relate to sports, whether they played them or not. Everyone knows what it feels like to win or lose at some point in their life. And I think exactly what you said is what you can do with a longer lens because usually a wider, you can still get body language and get that sense of place. But yeah, the eyes for me is certainly um, something that can tell and connect another person to a photo rather quickly.
Of the many things that you are extremely talented at, one of the things that I've really come to appreciate, it's two things. One is that you and I have been at events and we may be next to each other or not far from each other shooting a football game, a baseball game, whatever it is. And at some point, I will happen to see a picture or pictures that you shot during that game. And I know I was near you and I didn't see that thing. And so your ability to see is remarkable. The other thing that I so appreciate, and I call these small moments, it is you have young kids who are collecting autographs, and you can get the picture of the kid with the ball waiting to get it signed, or you can just get a photo of this child's hands with the ball and a pen in them. And that tells the entire story of a young person and all that comes with hoping to get an autograph of their heroes. And I think that you have done a phenomenal job capturing those small moments where generally you do need a longer lens just to be able to get in on them. But maybe talk about, you know, how you approach seeing, whether you're on a sideline or, for that matter, you could be at one of your kids' events and you have the camera, but just what's the mindset as far as what I'm going to look for beyond just the obvious reason that you're there?
Yeah, uh, that's a loaded one, Mitch.
Yeah, of
Uh,
course.
why would I ask anything different?
Yeah, I'm going to make
Uh,
some tea while you answer. Yeah.
yeah, uh, there's a lot that goes through my head. There's so much, sometimes it just wants to spill out of my ears. Um, the main thing I love about sports photography, and I'm kind of answering your question of like we're shoulder to shoulder. It's a game of inches, I always call it in sports, right? You can have everybody can be lined up within an inch of each other, 10 deep, 10 wide, with the same lens, and it's a level playing field, right? It's like playing sports. It's a level playing field. Everyone has the same equipment. No one has a different, I mean, maybe people could cheat. And I mean, you see it sometimes in sports, but like I consider a level playing field. Like new soccer, for example, everyone has cleats, everyone has shin guards, there's one ball, right? You're either fast, you're not, you're skilled, you're more skilled, less skilled, right? What have you put into it? What haven't you put into it? So like that start with that level playing field. But then I think I don't want what everyone else has. And I think that's something that a lot of younger photographers fall into. They want to go to a baseball game and get a picture of the star player because everyone is doing that. I never wanted that. I never got into photography to get a picture that someone else had. I just think it's pretty mundane. It's pretty boring. Like you go out to set your own career, have your own path. Um, so that's the first thing is I don't want what everyone else has. The second one is people always laugh, but it's boredom. Um, I've been to so many games and so many places and seen so many teams that sometimes I get there and like, I've seen this before. I've seen this light. I've seen this weather. I've seen these players. I need to change it up, right? And that it's maybe boredom isn't the right word. It's more of like risk taking and breaking the rules of like that fundamental of like I got to show up and I got to get this, and check these boxes. And that's not to say that I don't do that because we have client expectations, but it's like I want to go out and just do something completely different, and be comfortable being uncomfortable. And that causes a lot of stress. Maybe that's caused the gray hairs since we've met. I'm not sure. Um, I think those two come to mind as the biggest things for me. Is that I don't want what anyone else has, and it's more or less being curious, pushing through that boredom, and just willing to be great. You got to be dare to be great, and if you don't take that risk, and look, I mess up all the time. I miss pictures. You might see the stuff that you weren't looking for, or whatever, but there's a lot of mistakes in there, in doing that. And I think a lot about golf. Golfers don't inherently make bad shots on purpose, right? If you play golf or you've ever watched golf, like they hit it into the bunker or the sand trap. They weren't trying to hit it in there, right? And I think photography is the same way, especially for me and my processes of wanting to be different. I hit it in the sand trap all the time. You just don't see it. You know what I mean? You don't see the internal struggle that I have. But then I'm able to chip out of there and get onto the green and make a great putt. And you're like, wow, that's a great picture. You're like, but you don't know how I got there. And whether it was in 10, 30 days, weeks, amount of time to get to that one photo. So I think about that often.
You talk about, swings and misses before you get a hit and that kind of thing. And I was talking to a curator, a photography curator, on a previous episode. And I said to her that, especially in sports photography, but in general, we make thousands of images and the vast majority will never see the light of day. And from her vantage point, I think very fairly, she said, that's so sad. And I said, well, when you have a sporting event, you have different compositions that are so comparable to the next one and the one before it that we're trying to pick out the very best of that handful of images. And so, I know that listeners are people who shoot sports, they shoot friends and families, games, etc. But I think that when someone comes back and they say, I photographed my child's game and I must have taken 200 pictures, um, they don't necessarily know what a traditional baseball or football game means in terms of volume. So, on average, whether it's baseball or it's football, what would you say an average number of photos is that you actually capture versus the number that will get out through Getty Images to the clients that Getty serves, just from like a ratio standpoint to help people kind of get their mind around that?
Yeah, so I just was in Eugene for the U.S. Outdoor World Championships, and there was three photographers, and we all had different positions each day. We were working together, obviously, as a team, and let's say 3 days, and maybe it was 4 days long, and we had a remote editor. So we're shooting, we're sending pictures. I believe we sent like transmitted to the editor over 4 days, 3,000 pictures. And I believe they posted around 15 or 1,600 pictures. So about 50% of what we sent.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, on an average with myself, like if I'm shooting an Orioles game, like next to you, I could be shooting anywhere from 1,500 pictures to 5,000 pictures in a single game. And then I'm transmitting 20 to 50 live on site, right? So I'm downloading my card, I'm looking through them. I usually tag them in the back of the camera so I know what I'm looking at before I get up there. and then captioning, send them out. And then the next day around 150, 200 more. So I can't do the math. I was never good at math, but you think somewhere in the line of 200, 250 pictures from upwards of thousands of pictures. So the percentage is pretty small.
Yeah.
But I also think when I started my career, I remember shooting like 8 frames a second. I thought that was incredible. Now we're at 40.
Yep.
So as you said, like big moments get more images. You're working angles, you're working moments, you're working light, you're working emotions and moods, and you're really trying to make it perfect. And I think you have to be a perfectionist to do this because
Mhm.
otherwise, and I use my wife as an example, who's sitting downstairs, who often photographs my son's lacrosse games while I help coach. And I take the card at the end of the day and we get home, like, you shot 500 pictures with a camera that shoots 40 frames a second. How did you do that? Like, you're either like the most decisive photographer I've ever met in my life, or you're looking over and reacting. Like, there's all these things, but I kind of tease her. I'm like, I don't know how you've done that because even as a professional, like, it's not like I'm hammering just to find it. I just know the moment I want. And sometimes it takes hitting that 40 frames a second to get that one or two images out of that. It's like, wow, that's the one. So yeah, the percentages are rather low. But
Yeah. As gear has evolved, I appreciate personally better low light performance,
of course,
for sure. But I feel free, of course, to disagree with me on this, what I'm about to say. But you talked about 8 frames per second, and now we're at 40 frames per second. And I feel like, in my own experience, that it's generally that first or second frame is the one I intended to get. If frames 3 or 4 through 15 or whatever it is, if that captures something that's really great or really solid, that was something that I didn't see coming. It was something that, maybe it was a reaction after a shot, but that wasn't what I was shooting for. I was trying to get the shot, but by just holding the shutter down, I got the reaction. So I guess, when I hear about some cameras having 130 frames per second, all I hear is, wow, that's a lot of computer space and a lot of editing. So, what are your thoughts on that, and just kind of how cameras have evolved and helped us, or maybe been not a help or a hindrance?
yeah, a lot of photographers now go, like, oh, I dial back the 40 frames a second. I hear that all the time
Yeah.
because I don't, right? And it's maybe some of my older colleagues that have started with film and like have really seen that huge progression, right? Like 3 frames a second of shooting IndyCar and getting some amazing picture where it was like obviously like that timing was everything, right?
Hmm.
3 frames versus 40. But to me, it's like having a race car, right? I want the best fuel in it. I want the best everything with the best tires. I want everything. So I'm cranking it all the way, right? I'm keeping it there. That
Hmm.
doesn't mean that every time I shoot, it's like boom, it's 40 frames a second the whole time. It means that like a moment, I keep using baseball because I feel like I see you at baseball all the time, but it's like a home run, right? You sense that it's going to be a home run. You sense that's a good swing, right? So it's 10 to 30 pictures on the swing. And then as they come up first base, they might be tipping their hat and flapping the bat or something like that. That's another 10 or 30.
Hmm.
And as they round the bases, like they're high-fiving maybe the third base coach, another 10, 30, right? Like that's not hard to do because you're just like, whoop, whoop, and it's just like coming,
Yeah.
right? And then they might point to the sky, they might celebrate. Then you go to the dugout. Before you know it, you have 200, 300 pictures, right? So that goes pretty quick in just one little moment
Hmm.
because you don't know what of those moments is going to be the best. And it might be the dugout high fives, or like Dodgers, they throw the sunflower seeds, and Orioles, they do the homer hose and that kind of stuff. So you just never know what moment's going to be the best. So I always want to make sure that I have it, especially when I have an editor or I have a lot of client expectations. I, it's not that I'm trying to be so selective. It's just like I'd rather have it. And sometimes we have editors like, Patrick, you shoot too heavy. It's like, well, if I didn't have it, you'd certainly be looking for it. So kind of to answer your question is I'm all about it. I'm all about the progression of lenses and cameras and making things lighter and faster and like bring it on. Like I'm here for the advancement of photography. Um, And I know we've talked about like Leicas and stuff like that and photo work rooms and trying to slow that process down, uh, which I think kind of rekindles that romance for photography for me sometimes is like just slowing down because what we do in sports is so fast and so much and it's a lot of pictures. But yeah, I'm all for it. Bring it on. And I wouldn't want it any other way. But I certainly do remember like 2 gig cards, and now I'm up to 256. And
Yep.
I remember pushing 1600 ISO for the first time, shooting like a Morgan State basketball game. And I'm like, I'm allowed to do this? Like, this isn't gonna just completely fall apart. Like, what? Like I vividly remember those, and I'd never considered myself kind of like a gear nerd in that sense, or like a tech nerd. I think I'm pretty smart with that stuff, but I never felt like I look back in that way. But I remember vividly those games and those times and those places where I was like, wow, look at this. I have a 4 gig card, 8 gig card. Like I'm
Yeah.
really pushing this boundary now.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's like you're breaking the land speed record, and it's just, yeah, it's kind of
Yep.
wild. So I know I've spoken with a lot of photographers over the course of the podcast as well as just in general, and it's about a 50-50 split of what I'm going to ask you. So when I talk to people and I say, you shoot music photography, street photography, or whatever genre the person is professionally working in, and I'll say, when you're not at work, do you make pictures? Do you bring a camera? Is there a different form of photography that kind of re-energizes you from what you're doing, for an income as an occupation? So I'll ask you, when you're not at an event shooting, do you have a camera with you, or is your cell phone your camera, or are you just as happy to just not even think about photography when you're off?
I am so hopelessly in love with this business and photography in a whole that I'm so obsessed that my everyday is consumed with photography. This job, this life is photography. Like it's an identity. Like it's certainly everything that I have. I spend all day looking at pictures, and it's not just sports. It's surf photography, it's wildlife, it's street photography, it's everything you can possibly think of that I'm engaged in because I feel like I can get an inspiration from that. I just also love just looking at pictures and I love connecting with photographers and maybe taking something from what they do and bringing it to what I do, right? It could just be a small conversation. It could be a picture where I'm like, wow, maybe if I tried this at sports, it could take me to the next level. Uh, when I walk around, certainly it's my phone. My phone is always in my pocket. I love to photograph my kids. I do shoot some of their sports. I do help coach a lot of them. So it's like often really difficult. I'm being like tugged by both arms, like, coach, no, shoot pictures, no, go this way. Like, so it's really difficult. Um, but I also got into a few years ago during the pandemic shooting waves, like Ocean City waves in Delaware. My parents have a place. When sports kind of slowed down, I was like, how can I stay creative, right? Because there wasn't pro sports happening every other day like it is now. And I bought wetsuits and I bought a Alphatec housing and fins. And I was going out into the ocean when it was 29 degrees outside and the ocean was in the mid 30s or low 40s early in the morning. And I was just shooting like curling waves and like finding the beauty in that. And I really love that. It was really part of like a new identity that I had during that time. I've since sold it because my kids play sports 7 days a week and it's hard to get there and do it. But yeah, I think just finding inspiration in whatever form of photography can only help you in your career or in your hobby or whatever you want to call photography in your life. I don't know if that answers your question, but it's like I just love photography. I just love it all. Like it's not like, oh, I only should look at sports or I only look at photojournalism because that's what I do. It's everything. Like my Instagram is just completely chalked of different genres, and I look at it and I go, "Wow, that's cool." Or how did they get that? Or I love to connect with that. And sometimes I send a note. Like I sent notes to Zach Noyle, who's like Canon ambassador who shoots big waves in Hawaii. And the guy gets right back to me. It's like, "Oh yeah," and I'm like, "Oh, check out my work." I was like tiny little waves compared to these like massive, like towering Empire State Building type waves he's like neck deep in. But it's cool that photographers can just be humble and be
Yeah.
human and connect, and like it doesn't matter if you're just starting out or you just like their work and they can reach out. So I could go a different avenue of like I've always done that for others too, because people have always done that for me of like looking out after me, whether I was in the position I'm in now or just starting out. So, but yeah,
And
this world is amazing in photography.
people have asked me that question as well, and what I have, I don't know that I coined this at all, but I just say I feel like I live a photographic life where even if I don't have a true camera, I see people and I see objects and I see light and shadow and compositions. And for me, it has enriched my life more so than, I parked the car and I got to walk to a building to do something. And I'm just like, am I late? Am I on time? What do I need to do when I get there? I'm looking around at my
Yep.
surroundings and I'm seeing, just all these things where often I wish I had a camera, or if I don't have the camera, at least I kind of almost make like a mental snapshot, like that would be a cool picture. That would be a cool picture. I mean, I feel like it's like an occupational hazard. I can't not think that way. Sounds like you can
Yeah.
relate to that.
Yes, it's a little bit of torture. And I use the example, we just were in Costa Rica for 10 days, my wife and my two kids, just on vacation. And it's long known that like my wife would just keep walking if I have a camera with me for like anywhere besides a sporting event. Like they don't stop. Like my wife and my kids, they just keep going, right? They're like, oh, I don't, he's taking a picture of something. I don't know, a wall. You know what I mean? He saw us, and they always joke, they go, nice light, nice light, nice light. Because they like, I'm always saying, they're like, oh, look at that beautiful light. Like, oh, but we're in Costa Rica, and obviously it's just a beautiful country, and the people are just amazing. And we were way up in this rainforest early in our trip, and I was driving through. I had run these roads in the day, in the mornings. It was like just dirt roads and like rubble, and perfect example of like, man, I wish I had a camera with me because I would never come back. It would be like a 7 hour run because I'd be like, oh, look at that. Oh, hey, can I take a portrait of you? Right. And we were driving out of this town, and this young man was like selling fruit. And it was just like handwritten signs on like boards. And it was just like super cool and interesting. And I didn't stop. And like, I was just kind of silent. And I was like, I really should have taken that guy's picture. And I was like, do you want to go back? I'm like, I don't know if I should. But like it kind of like tortured me the rest of the day of like
Yeah.
it was just so unique, and like to them it was just ordinary life, but to me it was just like this compelling moment that I wanted to share with my friends and family or just maybe keep for myself. But yeah, it's like it is kind of like a push and pull where it's you really want to take a picture of everything, but sometimes you just have to enjoy it and you just have to live life. But yeah, you're right. Like you use it very eloquently and like beautiful. To me, it's more of torture of like, man, I should have gone back and taken that picture. Like it haunts me a little bit, but
Yeah.
that's life. That's what's part of being a human, right? Just going around going like, I'm going to enjoy this rather than take a picture that maybe no one ever see or maybe appreciate. Because there are a lot of pictures on my phone that are like that, where it's like, I don't know if anybody would appreciate it, but I do, and maybe got me through whatever moment in time it was. So
Well, a lot of times, people will say, well, that person is interesting, or that scene is interesting, but I'm not really good photographing people, or I'm not really good, dot dot dot. And I think a lot of times I'm not really good at means I'm not comfortable with, or I'm not sure how I would even start that, or on the most basic level, I don't know my camera well enough to make the most of that thing that I'm looking at. So, what would be your advice to somebody who says, well, I would do that, but I'm not really good at that? What would you kind of suggest if they actually wouldn't mind being better, if not good at that?
yeah, I think I said it earlier, but like getting comfortable with being uncomfortable is a huge thing in photography. I remember early in my career at Towson University, I'd walk into like, I don't know, the provost office or like the president's office or whoever was like being hired on campus to do a portrait. And I would just be completely soaking wet in sweat. I was so nervous. I didn't know how to communicate with people. I didn't know how to talk to them. I thought I was being judged. Like, I don't know what it was, but it was like I was just so uncomfortable. And I realized like you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable because being a photographer is not really something that people often have something right in their face, right? Like they're way more uncomfortable than you are. I promise you that. Um, so that's the first part. So you have to get comfortable with being that way. Two would be like you have to be a humanizing person. You have to be relatable and likable, especially if you want to photograph people. I use it in sports all the time. It's eye contact, it's body language of your own. It's a smile, right? Showing your palm. Like I'm not going to be dangerous here, right? Like I'm not trying to take advantage of you, right? It's just like I just want to take your picture. And sometimes it's just using your words too. It's like, hey, I really like your hat, or I love what you're doing. And maybe if you don't even speak that language, like I don't speak much Spanish, but there's a couple times I was like, photograph, like yes, yes, and yeah, 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 see, right? So it's those kind of things. Trusting your instinct is a big one, right? It's just like, is that what your gut's telling you? Is it a good picture? Is it the moment you need? Um, but yeah, there's a lot of self-negotiation happening, right? I'm just what I'm talking about is going, yes, no, yes, am I comfortable? Can I make an excuse? I would say leave the excuses at home. Um, just go for it. With the worst someone can ever say to you if you want to photograph them is no, and you turn around and walk away, or you get a chance to connect with somebody, right? It's like, hey, Mitch, I really like your hat. Can I photograph you? And you go, no. Like, well, that's okay. Just letting you know, like I'm a photographer and I really like your hat. And I think it made a great picture. But where are you from? Right. Next thing you know, you have some sort of bond and fostering a relationship with somebody in your community or somewhere you're traveling or on a sports field or whatever it is. And I think that sometimes is much bigger than the picture itself, right? Is having a sense of community. So um, it's not so much advice rather than just like learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable.
It's almost like just, just do it. Because if you say, what's the worst thing that could happen? If the worst thing is the person says no, or the worst thing is you're not thrilled with the photo, it's nothing lost,
Yeah,
you know?
nothing
And,
at
and,
all.
and maybe, and maybe it does work out. So let's have a scenario where you are in a city, could be New York, could be Washington, could be international, and you have the option to bring a particular camera and one lens or a particular camera and two or three lenses. Which are you doing?
Just did this. Just when we were in Costa Rica, I'm like, I'm traveling light. I want to have a camera, but I don't want to have a camera connected to my hip the entire time. And I took a Canon R5 Mark II. I knew the file size was great. I knew that I could get what I wanted. I knew the frame rate was good if I happened to see like some sports or something that was moving quickly, or my kids surfing that I took pictures of, but I was like trying not to drown the camera without a housing.
Right.
And I took a 24 to 70 and I took a 28 pancake lens. The 28 pancake lens was kind of just like my everyday that was with me. And then if I knew we were doing something like a hike or maybe going to a beach where like some locals could be playing soccer or something like that, I took the 24 to 70. Um, I like traveling light. I like having latitude to crop and not carry 7200 if I'm traveling.
Mhm.
But yeah, that's kind of like a really basic setup for me. I don't, again, I don't do too much like street photography style stuff. It's more like when I'm traveling, walking a city with like before an event, like if I'm going to Tokyo later this year for track and field world championships, certainly kind of carry a camera around the streets with me. And it'll probably be that R5 Mark II and a 28 pancake lens just because it's so light. And sometimes it just looks less professional. It's like I can be a little bit more discreet if I want to get more of a street style type photo, and people just kind of walk by me instead of going, "Well, it's that big lens." Because that happened in Costa Rica when I had that 24-70. People come up and they go, "Quanto, quanto?" Like, how much? How much? And I
Oh
was like, "Oh,
gosh.
a couple $100, right?" Like, you know, what I mean, you probably see that a lot in your travels. If people see a nice camera and they want to know how much it is, and you're trying to negotiate, and like, are they trying to rob me, or are they just curiously interested because they don't see big cameras all the time? And then you break down like they're just interested, right? Like usually the time they're really interested in like what you have and they want to see the pictures and um so yeah, I think small and discreet is the way to go when you're traveling.
It's funny you say that. So I was in Havana and I'm walking down the street, and this man who spoke almost no English came running up to me, pointing at my camera, and I is a fairly small camera, fairly small lens, and he's saying, red dot, red dot. And he says, nice camera. And I said, oh, thank you. And I says, how do you know? He says, red dot, good camera. So fast forward, I now, if I'm carrying a camera from the Red Dot brand,
Yeah.
I will put a piece of black tape over Red Dot
Yeah.
because sometimes people are just curious or they're camera buffs, etc., and then sometimes they're really interested in the value of that thing around your neck.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to be said for a small, setup that looks very amateurish, and you're just a tourist, and so yeah, I can relate. I was just blown away by here's this guy in Havana, and he knew that he didn't know the name, but he knew the
Yeah.
red dot meant it was a nice camera.
And it's
Yeah, it
funny
was.
because I had one of those red dot cameras as we talked about at
Yeah,
some point. And I was just assumed people thought like I was shooting film, like I was just like walking around, like I saw they like, oh, this guy's got this old camera, right? Like that was
right.
my perception, right? But I guess if people really know or just have a sense of what they're looking at, then that totally changes their perspective. But I was just like, oh, I don't have this big bulky digital camera. They think, oh,
Yeah,
this guy's shooting film, or like, look at this guy, he's got this old camera, right? Like that's kind of like my assumption of it. So
that's funny. Well, with the, in your case, you were taking a 28 lens, which is a pretty, good field of view. It's wide enough without being excessively wide. And, I think that a lot of, especially amateur photographers, they will put a lens that is lightweight, that will give them the ability to have versatility, to be able to do portraits and architecture and things like that, especially if you're on vacation. But I don't know that most of those people know what the field of view is. So I don't know that they're thinking consciously about, when I look through my lens, this is going to be left to right, top to bottom, what the range is of what I can see. Because
mhm.
if I have a 50, this will be the range. Now they know that 50 will be a longer lens than 28, but to be able to actually see and know in advance of looking through the lens finder. And maybe if you can kind of share your thoughts on the value of understanding that difference, not only when you decide what lenses to bring, but just in terms of seeing compositions before you even put the camera up to your eye.
Yeah, I think everyone has an iPhone or has a respective phone that is typed like an iPhone, and they don't realize that that is pretty much close to what you're seeing, right? So if they're putting on a 28 or a 35 or something in that close range, it's going to feel comfortable, right? And I think that's what I kind of go for is like I have my iPhone, but the file isn't as great as I wish it could be. So if I'm taking a camera around with me, I want that extra file, but I still want to see what I see. And I don't like being too tight. Like again, we're talking about stuff that I don't shoot professionally, just my day to day. But I do want to have a little bit sense of place. Like when I shoot golf, a lot of times we're shooting with a 400, it's waist up, it's neck and steel, right? Just the driver, their belt, their logo, their hat, right? And it's green. Everything's green behind them. And they could be at the Augusta, at the Masters. They could be at Pebble Beach. They could be at a golf course right down the street from my house in Maryland. You would have no idea because it's just green. So I think for a lot of times when I'm walking around, whether it's my phone or a camera and having that typical field of view that we see day to day, I want to show people where I am, give them that sense of place. And I do that in sports as well. I do that in sports all the time where it's like shooting with that 400. I'm like, Patrick, step back, right? Shoot a wide angle lens. Doesn't have to be a beautiful scene, but like show people where you are. Even if they've seen it before, you need to step back and show them that. So it is important, just I think in day to day, we talked about just whether you have a camera or not, seeing that and enjoying the beauty of life. And I think it's just a beautiful perspective. But then again, we have beautiful lenses that can get tight and get super wide and help us enjoy a variety of environments that you don't want to just be tunnel vision by one aspect ratio.
Well, yeah, and I think when you come upon a scene, whether it's wildlife or sports or just about whatever, you have your wider kind of scene setter, which
Yep.
shows the person, the animal, the subject in their environment, but then you can get incrementally closer, ultimately to have a portrait or have just detail of the face. And that is one of the benefits of having some of these longer zoom lenses, is that with one lens you can capture all of those elements. Sometimes you don't have quite the speed of the lens for low light, et cetera, but it does give you that flexibility. And so, one of the questions that we often get, either in the days that follow, actually, most episodes, is what does the guest typically shoot with? So what is your typical kind of go bag when you're shooting football or you're shooting track or you're shooting, any of these major events? What kind of gear typically goes with you?
Yeah. So it lives in this door, not the little skinny door. People always ask, what's in that skinny door? Skinny door is just books and stuff. So in this little door, it's a shelf, but I have a think tank roller, and that is loaded with my go-to everyday gear that I basically take on 99% of my assignments. And that's three Canon R1 bodies, top of the line, super fast, incredible autofocus, 400 millimeter lens. And then I have a 7200 2.8, 24 to 70 2.8, 16 to 35 2.8. And my new love is an 85 1.2. And those live in my bag. Um, Rarely am I swapping that out. Sometimes a long glass would be a 600 or maybe a 1 to 3. But I love shooting wide open. And those basically like on the Holy Trinity, kind of like the 2470, 7200, and a 400 in my case. Those get my job done, whether it's a day-to-day routine baseball game on a Tuesday night in August, or it's a global major event like the Olympics or Super Bowl or World Cup or whatever it is. Like, I know that I can get the job done with that kit, and I know it's tried and true in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that people certainly appreciate what you're doing and have, at least in their mind's eye, a sense of what it's like. But in reality, it's a lot of being on the go. It's a lot of, unfortunately, missing certain events that you probably would really like to be able to attend, just because, as the expression goes, duty calls. So, maybe share with people, in a given month or so, if you can think of a particular one, where did your work have you going and shooting? Because I know you can be local and you can also be very far away in other countries and certainly other states. So what's a month or 6 weeks in the life like for you typically?
It can be anywhere and everywhere. I'm sitting in my office for maybe like the third or fourth day in the last 8 weeks, which is not often a typical thing, but this summer has been almost as busy as like an Olympic summer like last year. So basically the first week of June, I started out the US Open golf tournament in Pittsburgh. I was there for a week. It's a Monday to a Monday kind of assignment. And from there, I had one day off and I went straight into the Club World Cup, which is basically the World Cup for club teams. And it's kind of a test event for the World Cup, which is in this country next year. And I was gone, I mean, 4 or 5 weeks doing that. That took me from Atlanta to Nashville, back to Atlanta to Orlando to Jersey. Never coming home once, basically living in a hotel room and having a soccer game every other day. Um, it was pretty grueling because I came straight from the US Open. And then we talked about Costa Rica. I was home for not even 24 hours. I went to Costa Rica for 10 days and I was home for 24 hours. And I just got back from Eugene, Oregon, covering the US Outdoor Championships, which was a 4-day event, but I was there for 5 or 6 days. So that stretch from basically the 1st of June to the 1st of August is where I've been. And then in about 3 or 4 weeks, I'll be heading to Tokyo for the Track and Field World Championships, which is about 3.5 weeks of my life there. Um, but given any other month, any other year, I cover all the local teams here in Baltimore and DC. It's the Orioles, it's the Nationals, it's Washington Capitals, Washington Wizards, Commanders, Ravens. I'm covering all my hometown teams, but then I'm doing probably two international trips a year, which could be anywhere from 2 weeks to 4 weeks. I've done up to like 50 plus days, like at a World Cup, like in Russia, not coming home. And then obviously traveling in the United States as well as covering golf tournaments, covering anything that clients might have a request for. So any given year, I would say I could be on the road 100 to 180 days away from home, which is pretty intense. But I do love it. And I do, when I miss my kids or I know I'm traveling a lot, I go, I'm getting to see the world and I'm getting to document the world's greatest sporting events for a global giant company that I've always dreamed of being for. So it all changes. It's all different. There's no 9 to 5 with this job. There isn't like, oh, you get the weekends off, or like you get to go home and see your kid's birthday. Like, no, you have to be at the Masters for your kid's birthday, right? So there's a lot of give and take. But my kids understand it. My wife certainly has been with me this whole way and totally gets it. So having a good support system and obviously a great team that I work for that always has your back when you're on the road, I think really makes it for you.
I think you need to come out with the Patrick Smith World Tour T-shirts, like Aerosmith and like rock bands, and
Yeah.
it's just got where you are, the stadium or the arena, and the dates, and of course, everyone would be sold out every event. So that I think that's really good insight, and beyond that though, even I think if you have a football game, and let's say it's a 1 o'clock start, people are oftentimes familiar that there's a 1 o'clock start and there's also typically a 4 o'clock start. So if you have a 1 o'clock game, shed some light on when you arrive at the stadium. And if the game ends around 4, when do you leave? Just to get a feel for how many hours it is that, seemingly it's a 3 hour event, but for you, it's really about how long from the time you leave home.
Yeah, I always laugh because my friends, even my neighbors, I can look out the window, they're probably thinking I just show up at 1 o'clock and
Oh, yeah.
like shoot the game and like I'm out and like that's it. Like I take a couple like cool pictures for Instagram. Like they have no idea what we actually do or the amount of time that goes into it. So it always makes me chuckle that that's kind of what people would probably assume. Or like when I'm home during the day and like out for a run or like just sitting on my front porch, like taking a call, people are like, this guy never works. You know what I mean? Like they're at home like sleeping and I'm like out working. But like for a 1 o'clock football game, I try and get there 3, 4 hours early. It's a bit of an overkill, but
Mhm.
you have to remember you're fighting 80,000 fans getting in and out of these places, and uh, well, I say we are also trying to make sure that everything's in order, right? You have your gear ready, your computer set up. We do a lot of remote editing, so we have editors that are whether they're in the States or in the UK or somewhere else editing our work live. So you want to connect with them, make sure everything's working. You do want to have a little something to eat and just kind of like anything else, warm up like the players. It's not just like you show up and you get ready, like you shoot warm ups and you think, okay, let me get into my groove. Let me see how things are feeling. Let me see what I want to try to be different. But I also typically, once the game starts, I would say if it's a 1 o'clock game, I'm usually home like 4.5, 5 hours after kickoff starts. That includes like a drive home and all that. So it's a pretty long day. It can be 10, 12-hour day just for one football game. And again, that's just an everyday assignment that I think is fairly typical in my life. We're not talking an Olympics where you're working 12 or 14-hour days every day for 2 plus weeks. It's all variable and changes on you. But it never feels that long. There's certain days where you're like, man, I was out in the heat for 10 hours on a golf course. I'm just drained. I think a lot of times you're just so into it and you like, I love it. I love what I do.
Yeah.
I love the people that I work alongside. Like you're an example of like, you don't work for Getty Images, but it's like, I like being next to Mitch. Like we can sit there and talk about things and like when there's downtime and you smile and you laugh and this life would be pretty boring on the sidelines without people, to communicate with and have fun with. So the days do feel like it's not really work. I know it's kind of cliche. It's like, oh, you never work a day in your life if you're having fun, but it's kind of true. It really is true.
It's funny that you say that because we can be having a conversation on the sideline during a timeout, and then the play starts. We stop talking, and then something happens, and then you go your way, I go mine, and then a quarter and a half later, we're next to each other again, and we pick up the conversation like it never stopped.
Before you even said that, I was thinking like most people would think that was so bizarre, right? It's
Yeah,
like, what? You just it's like, yeah, it's like nothing ever happened, right?
yeah, yeah. It's it's
It can be
definitely that.
mid-sentence. It can be like you're talking and it's like they hike the ball and then it's like, oh yeah, 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 and this, that, and the other. But yeah, it's kind of bizarre. A
It,
therapist would love to dissect that, I'm sure.
yeah, I don't want to I don't want to get in front of that therapist. So as you're talking about all these sports that you're involved with, are you seeing increased either domestic or worldwide popularity of any particular sports that you're asked to shoot either for the first time or more often than what you might have done 5 years ago?
Hmm. Popularity. I think photography in general is more popular than ever. Um, at Getty, we partner with like 80 leagues and teams around the world, like the biggest identities, right? Like FIFA. Like I just shot for
Mhm.
FIFA. Like I wasn't shooting for Getty, I was shooting for FIFA through Getty Images because they're a
Okay.
commercial partner of ours and the PGA, Major League Baseball, and all these leagues and teams, and they love photography because there wasn't social media 5, 10 years ago, and maybe there was, but like just not in that presence that it is today, right? Like
Yeah.
you can take a picture. Like I took a picture this weekend of like Noah Lyles winning the 200 meter and getting shoved by another athlete. And I'm sending it live to my editor and it's all over the place, right? Like they had that instant gratification, whether it's the league or the organization committee or whatever it is, or just newspapers, media outlets, ESPN, whatever it is, like they have instant access to images, right? Where back in the day they had to wait,
Mhm.
right? Our speed to market, I think, is just insane now. It's so insane. I think when I started at Getty, this is back in like 2014, we were just kind of really like using Ethernet cords into the camera. And if someone doesn't understand that, like if I'm shooting by myself, I'm ingesting a memory card into my camera by myself and I'm working it up. Otherwise, I have an Ethernet cable like you have into your computer to get internet plugged into my camera, or I'm sending from like a MiFi device that can send the images wirelessly. And when I do that, we can have images up in like 26 seconds or something ridiculous. Like the world can see from the minute I send it, like shoot it. Sometimes I shoot it and go straight down the pipe, go straight down that line. In 26 seconds, the world has it. So I don't know if it's more popularity of sports, but I think it's the popularity of photography is more than ever just a great value for everybody because they can have it instantly and everybody wants it, right? Everybody wants eyeballs on their work. And when I say our work, I think of just their teams and their players, and it's amazing. It really just blows my mind from even just probably, man, we've started using an NFL remote desk. Basically, when we shoot, we have remote editors doing every single picture a few years ago. And before that, we had card runners, which you're aware of, which like
Oh yeah.
basically like I would bring my wife to a game or a friend and I would shoot a picture and then hand them the memory card and they would run inside and plug it into my computer. And then the editor was sitting there, right? Like catching the picture. So like this like little chain of
Hmm.
like operation of all humans. And now it's just like I can just send it through the space and then someone catches it in 26 seconds, the world has it. Like that's unbelievable. Like just totally blows my mind every time. And to think that's only going to get faster, right? It's only going to get faster. Um, but yeah, I don't know if I have the answer of like what's becoming more popular. I think just photography is just so engaging and popular, and I think it's just going to get even better.
I see sports, for example, and this has been around for a while, but like the WNBA, the popularity of it has never been higher than it is now. You have sports like Formula One, which certainly have been extremely popular worldwide, but in the United States, it's really only become a really well-known presence probably since Netflix and the Drive to Survive show, and then they've added races in Miami and Las Vegas and in Austin. And so, when you have those events, you have photographers who are on the circuit, and wherever they're racing they go, but then you also have domestic photographers who will be shooting that 5 years ago wouldn't have shot it because it just wasn't an event here.
Yep.
So, and maybe that all ties into whether it's streaming channels or it is social media, as you say. Um, do you all ever get involved in shooting video and creating video and photography uh, presentations, or is that something that doesn't really get done because you have television stations that contract for the video, and then you guys are the still entity?
Yeah, you kind of answered that question. In my world in sports, we are certainly trying to ramp up video in everything we do. It's proven to be a good revenue source for us. People are craving it. They want it. And a lot of times, well, I say a lot of times, most of the time in the sports world, we're stuck by broadcasting rights. So we can film outside of the stadiums. But once we get inside, there's a few exceptions that we have that's worked with like a league or a team that we partner with. They say, well, you can shoot batting practice or something like that. Um, but yeah, once you get in, there's no video. And I even like sometimes I like want to show a video like to my kids, like not even shooting for work, like, oh, look at this funny like video on the scoreboard. And I even like find myself like not doing it because I don't want them to see like, oh, he's a media member shooting video, like and get in trouble.
Sure.
But it's definitely something people are craving in this industry. If we could do more of it, I'm sure certainly think we would. Um, I think our colleagues in Europe are able to do a little bit more with like football training or their football, soccer training and like press conferences and stuff like that. And I've seen some beautiful pieces that my colleagues have done of just like documentary style stuff of stories they've worked on. I did a story last year where I was able to shoot a little bit more video because they're not really professional athletes, they're amateurs. And I was able to kind of like shoot them training and doing that kind of stuff. And I have a couple clips on the course that we kind of just put together as like a storytelling piece component to when we release the story. But yeah, it takes me back to like when I started like shooting video.
Yeah, that's what I
And
was thinking.
but I think they're just completely different mediums, and like you really have to have a deep understanding because one you're capturing a split second, the other one you're capturing minutes of time, and it's completely different. So for me, when I see video really well done, I'm like, wow, like I can appreciate that, and it's like what went into that, or beautiful light, or the moments that had um, to be captured to get video versus like that split second that we're used to. But yeah, we're trying our best to do what we're able to do. But a lot of times it's like it's fans, it's mugs of the buildings or the stadiums that the players play in.
Yeah, it's like still photography, video is a true specialty unto itself. It's
Yeah.
not just about pushing a stop and a start button for sure. So I know that people are going to want to find out more about what you're doing and be able to follow you and social media and so forth. What's the best way for people to do that? Where should they go?
My Instagram is kind of like my little highlight reel. Patrick Smith photos or at Patrick Smith photos. It's kind of like my highlight reel. Um, I go back and forth on social media these days because I don't feel like, oh, you got to get the likes to be popular or whatever it is. But I try and keep it up to date. I try and to post something every so often. That would certainly be the first place to go if you want to see the most recent stuff. My website, patricksmithphotos.com. I try and update that as well, but you can certainly see a genre of work I do. I think we haven't talked, or maybe we didn't talk about kind of a lot of what I do at Getty and pro sports, but there you can see all the pro sport work I do. You also can see the feature type stories I do on athletes that aren't always professional athletes that I think are, for me, really interesting because they're kind of behind the scenes and people don't really know they exist. And then once you see them, you're like, wow, like that's really compelling. I'm so used to seeing LeBron James shoot a three-pointer and do his classic celebration. So
Sure.
there you can certainly see work as well that I'm very proud of.
Yeah, it's as you said, sometimes it's not the athletes that you see in the television ads and on the billboards. It's the athletes of every age, every background, every ability. But the consistent theme is that they're doing something they love, and to be able to show that and tell the story, it's remarkable. And is that so? Where would those types of photo stories be best found for you? Where can people find those?
So I try and do one a year. It doesn't always work that way because of my schedule. Um, but like last year, I worked on a story called Team Agar, and it's father and son, Jeff and Johnny Agar. And Johnny lives with cerebral palsy, and they're Ironman athletes.
Oh
So
wow.
they compete a grueling triathlon together, father and son, where the father basically pulls and pushes Johnny through the course. They completed a full Ironman here in Maryland, and last year they went to try and compete in Kona, which is the World Championships, and complete one of the world's hardest courses, and they fell a little short. But it was more about sport, right? It's more than sport for me all the time. And I think their story just showcased that the people matter, right? The relationships that Jeff and Johnny have as a father and son, and that dedication that they have to each other is really powerful. And I think sports in general do that for everybody. I might have said it earlier, but like you don't have to play sports to feel the emotions of them. And I think everybody can relate to that. And so that's what I'm always chasing. But to find a story like that, we're someone in in Getty's always working on something kind of I don't want to say offbeat, but just away from the professional sports realm. And we usually pitch that on our or promote it and push it out on our social channels with links to the entire take and video clips and stuff like that. And then I actually pitched it to the Players Tribune, that story I was just talking about, and they picked it up. So it got a lot of eyeballs and a lot of good attention, and again, just helps connect us all.
Well, and it's just, I guess you could maybe consider it human interest. I mean, yeah, yes, sports, but human interest certainly within sports.
Yep,
Yeah, yeah. No,
absolutely.
that's remarkable. Well, Patrick, I really appreciate you taking the time to jump on here and share your knowledge and your experience and some tips. I know people are going to really get a lot out of it, and I know that we'll get a lot of really good feedback. So thank you.
Thank you for having me. I know some of your members listening heard me speak in person, yeah, in person a few months ago, and that was a big joy for me. I love giving back, and I've said it here is that if anyone listening wants to reach out, be comfortable being uncomfortable to email me because I will respond. I didn't get here just by showing up and speaking to you today. Like I honestly had so much help. I saw so much help today. Um, it's not about the photos. It's about being a good person. And I think that's going to get you ahead. And so certainly reach out if you like a picture, if you want to speak, if you live in Maryland, you don't live in Maryland, you're listening. I would love to connect with you and help you along in your journey because I wouldn't be here without all the help I've gotten.
That's great. That's great. And I know it's heartfelt and sincere. So please listen to what Patrick said. And if you like to, take him up on that. And I want to remind everybody if you want to see what I have going on, you can, of course, go to Mitch Stringer Images on Instagram and Mitch Stringer Images online. Instagram is probably the best to see the latest of what's going on. And, as Patrick said, in my case as well, if you have questions, feel free to reach out. I do get a lot of gear questions, a lot of travel related photography questions, and I'm always happy to field those questions and get back with everybody pretty quickly. So, definitely invite you to do that as well. And until next time, I wish you great light. I wish you terrific shooting. I want to remind you that we publish a new episode on the 1st and 15th of every month. Tell a friend, like, subscribe, help spread the word. It really allows everybody to hear what we have going on and hear some stories and insights from really some of the very top photographers around. So until next time, take care.